And welcome to another fun-filled broadcast of that 401k podcast. Ari Rosenbaum, along here with Dan Venturi. Dan, how are you?
I am well, sir. How was your long weekend?
Yes, 4-day weekend because the kids had a day off on Friday because obviously we didn't have any snow days this year. So what did we do? Did a lot of shopping, which doesn't really help with my pocketbook. Did outlet shopping, went to see Aladdin, and went to a Mets game on Saturday night.
Did the Mets win? I think they won.
They won. We left at like the 12th inning, whatever. I think they won in like 14 or something like that. They blew the game. The big deal was that it was Star Wars night, so there was a Robinson Cano bobblehead, so we got them. And we were sitting in center field with the 7 line, which is the fan club. Some guy years ago set up a website selling T-shirts that were not licensed, and then he mushroomed it into a bigger business where now he's got the Mets license, and they have trips to individual stadiums, and they have trips to Citi Field for an event. So this was like the first time sitting with them in a long time at a Citi Field event. So with a lot of rabid Mets fans. And they're having an event in July in our favorite new stadium, Kauffman Stadium.
Oh, there you go. That was the Robinson Kenobi bobblehead, correct?
Yes, exactly.
Very nice.
So we got 4 of them. So that was the important aspect, and it was like the first 25,000 fans get them, and it's always kind of funny with what people come up to you knowing that you have them and try to make offers. I remember years ago. Like 2 years ago, maybe there was a Noah Syndergaard like hat hair thing where it was like they gave you a Mets hat, but it had like hair attached, and we got like 4 of them, and somebody offered us like $5 for it. My wife wanted to tell him to go F off. I'm like, I'm gonna sell it to you. If I'm gonna sell it to you, I'm gonna sell it for $5 when eBay's selling it for $25. So somebody came up to us.
Yeah.
Do you have any extra bobbleheads? And I'm like, no.
Nope. Just enough for us. Thank you.
Exactly. Not that I need 4 bobbleheads, but and they're not going for that much on eBay. So that tells you about Robinson Cano. This was my first Mets game for the year, so there were a couple of bobbleheads I actually had to go out and buy on eBay. There was the WWE Todd Frazier WrestleMania one, and there was a DeGrom one, and that was the WrestleMania weekend. We had a card show at my son, and then on that Sunday we had WrestleMania, so I couldn't go to either game. So. And we're back. We lost Dan for a second. So we're just talking about the bobbleheads. This was the 3rd game that they had bobbleheads. I have bobbleheads for the entire year, and there'll be some other bobblehead giveaways soon. So how was your weekend?
I was up in beautiful Avon, Connecticut. My daughter plays travel team soccer, so she had a tournament up there. It was our first away adventure, and it was a blast, man. It was just a really good time. I love watching her play. She played great. Had a couple of encounters with some jackwagon parents. So I've pretty much watched soccer for 40 years. Played for a long time in my life, at least before I got hurt. I have never, ever in all of that time seen a goal that was scored be taken down after halftime.
Wow.
So the parent essentially talked the ref into changing the call. They pulled the goal down and then restarted the second half with an indirect kick rather than the penalty that they had previously awarded. So suffice to say, and it was funny because it was also the team that hosted the tournament, and inevitably these things have a lot of hometown cooking.
Of course.
So outside of that, it was great. I had a great time.
Man, it sounds like the Soviet U.S. basketball game in '72. All of a sudden the refs are just doing whatever the heck they want to do.
Yeah, or another one. Remember, we talked about this. The Roy Jones in '88. Remember that gold medal?
Yeah. But I see a lot of people with the travel teams and all that. I had a friend; they went to Hershey for a tournament and all that stuff. It's really interesting that they do that. My kids gave up soccer long ago.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. I mean, look, as much fun as I have, it's all about her and making sure she has fun, and I think we were successful on both fronts.
Okay, so we got Denver in a couple weeks. June 14th, we'll be there at Coors Field, fun-filled event in Denver, Colorado. Game that night should be a lot of fun. Should be really exciting to go. And then of course we got events in Cleveland in September. We take the summer off just because everybody else is taking off, and we got to re-energize for the fall. And then we have an event at Disney World March 2020. Getting some sponsorships here and there, getting some interest and building that up. So hope for everybody to join us for a national conference at Disney World Swan. And, of course, information on all of our events are on that 401ksite.com. Our topic for this week is a favorite topic of mine. It started from an article that I started first writing when I first started my practice in 2010, and really it's dealing with how smaller 401k plans have a lot more problems than larger plans. And, everybody thinks the bigger the plan, the bigger the problem. And from our experience, as an ERISA attorney, Dan as a TPA, 316 administrator, advisor, you name it, he's done it. That really the honesty is the smaller the plan, the bigger the problem. And this podcast is all going to be about why and the problems dealing with smaller plans.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what the order was of the article, but I remember in reading it, the one big one, Ari, is the lack of the audit, right? Like that additional safeguard. And I don't want to misrepresent the audit as a catch-all, right? Because there's a lot of stuff, that gets through, and I can sort of speak volumes on that as a 316. But one of the big advantages that larger plans have in terms of being compliant is that annual audit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of misconceptions about the audit. The audit is not really a check on the overall administration of the plan. The audit is really it's really a financial control required on these 5,500s when you have the 100, 120 more participants, and it's really about the safeguards. Is there enough assets in the plan to pay plan participants? What are the dangers what are the problems with the plan that may be a consequence where they can't do that? And so it's looking at the overall health of the plan, but obviously they're not that careful where they're looking at plan costs and a lot of other things that plan fiduciaries have to do. But they do take a look at the plan and try to see what controls are in place to keep the plan assets safe. And it is a check. It's an extra check that the larger plans have that the smaller plans don't. It's an extra set of eyeballs. And so there have been a lot of times where during a plan audit, the plan auditor is the one who discovered a plan error that the TPA and the plan sponsor didn't, or even sometimes the advisor and the ERISA attorney didn't find as well. So it is a check, but it's not a check in terms of they're not a check on the TPA. They're a check to make sure that there are enough plan assets to be paid. There are enough assets to the assets are where the plan sponsor says they are. They're there to pay off plan participants and whatever kind of threats, existential or actual threats there are. That affects the overall financial health of the plan. I mean, that's really, in a nutshell, and a more great explanation of what it does. And, the small plan doesn't have that. So there really isn't that set of, whole set of extra set of eyeballs that can dwell and look and check what the TPA is doing. And that's a big deal. That the smaller plans obviously don't need it and don't have to pay for it, but obviously don't have.
Agreed, bud.
And that comes to the one thing that I think a lot of people really don't understand is that daily 401k plans are not created equally. Obviously, it's kind of like Animal Farm. More plans are created more equally than others, and larger plans have more equality because they get better pricing. Um, you have I hate to use the word better plan providers, but there's more competition in terms of plan providers and better pricing and some of these larger plan providers, you do get a better level of care than you would with some of these smaller providers. So I think that larger plans from the get-go have an advantage. When you have multiple plan providers trying to get that business, and when you're dealing with the micro small plan market and there's only one or two providers that you can go to, and some of which are annuity based products or insurance company based plans that have high surrender charges and this and that. um, they are inherently at a disadvantage to the larger plans.
Yeah, well, and I mean, this might be a opportunity for a shameless plug, and certainly we're not trying to discourage larger plans that require an audit from joining our MEP. But that's definitely one of the considerations that we had when we decided to launch our product was, being able to bring a compliant, cost-effective solution a little down market, right? I don't want to give the misconception that we're targeting the micro plans of the world, but certainly plans somewhere between 50 and 100 participants, $1 million to $3 million. The MEP solution is going to offer considerable value to those plans.
Well, absolutely. But that's why MEPs are an attractive solution for these smaller plans. The bigger bang for the buck, as they say. When you group it together, the cooperative exchange, where smaller plans, uh, uh, band together to get better pricing. I mean, that's inherently what Open MEP was always about. Obviously in theory, a lot of times not really in practice. But that's why Open MEPs were very attractive to these smaller plans. And the next thing is again something that I've always said. There are more problems than just a lawsuit. And when we always talk about fiduciary responsibility, fiduciary liability, years ago when I was on LinkedIn and talking about these things, but because nobody was talking about them, revenue sharing and fees and all that stuff, the argument always was, okay, small plans don't get sued. But you know what? To me, that's the least of a plan's worries. Smaller plans, have to deal with a lot of Department of Labor and Internal Revenue Service audits. And when a plan is, not in compliance, that could be a much bigger deal than any type of lawsuit. And government audits are a bigger threat than any type of litigation. So even if you're a larger plan, yeah, there's the threat of litigation, but overall, IRS DOL agent who knows what they're doing and spots some errors are obviously going to be a lot more damaging than an ERISA attorney because they know what they're looking for and they can find it. And when you're dealing with retirement plans, so many things need to be done, and one or two things go wrong. It's like a highly specialized machine. It's not a simple machine, so a lot of moving parts. Things can break, and
Sure.
you could get a lot of errors.
Sure. We say that all the time. There are a ton of moving parts to retirement plans. Every week, every 2 weeks, whatever the pay frequency is, there's a whole new set of data, whole new an opportunity for a bunch of new things to go wrong.
Exactly. And the next thing on our list, from my experience as an ERISA attorney dealing with employers, and this goes into 316 a little bit as well. But smaller plans have less experienced human resources staff than larger plans. When I worked for a law firm and we were dealing with a labor union, it was one of the largest labor unions in New York, one of the most powerful labor unions in New York, and they had a human resources staff where the guy was a certified employee benefits specialist, so he knew a thing or two about a thing or two. He knew about retirement plans. He knew basic terms, and not just basic, a lot of different terms and concepts. And he was really up to date on things, and he really understood these concepts. So it's easier to deal with him. And obviously, that would be a plan that didn't need a 316. But when you're dealing with smaller plans, a lot of times you're dealing with the owner of the company. They don't have a human resources director. When I worked for CBiz, Retirement Services Inc., or before that it was Mobius Tech, the human resources director was the boss's wife. She would show up to the office every now and then, maybe twice a week. She came in with a shopping bag, and she was there for a couple hours, and she'd leave. And I think the only thing she really did was give out the Land's End shirts with the monogram, with the logo, when people would order it. And when Mobius became CBiz Retirement Services Inc., I never ordered another shirt again. But that's neither here nor there. And, most companies are like that, where it's the employer, it's the owner, it's the owner's spouse, maybe it's one of the partners, or maybe it's somebody who's an office staff, maybe it was somebody who was a secretary is also wearing the other hat of an HR director. And these are nice people, but they don't have any type of background in employee benefits or retirement plans, and so it's harder to maneuver with them. Obviously, somebody who's more experienced can deal with the day-to-day plan administration a lot better than someone who doesn't. They could avoid and detect problems that employees who don't have a background can't. So, to me, that's always been a big deal. You work with publicly traded companies. Well, that's a totally different animal. You're working with a dedicated HR staff. Smaller employers, smaller businesses, you're not.
Yeah, I mean, I luckily, a lot of our plans are a little bigger in headcount. The smaller ones that we've dealt with, to your point, HR is typically, if there is an HR person, a lot more focused on other things in their retirement plan. Some of the startups that we had initially, the payroll person was running payroll, or the HR person was running payroll 2 days ago as the payroll person. Now he or she's in charge of all of HR. So and we talked about that a lot. I mean, that's a potential problem. You've got folks in situations where they're just ill-equipped, to handle. Not that they're trying to do a bad job; they just don't have, the knowledge to keep that plan out of trouble, or if it gets into trouble, pull it out of trouble. Right? I mean, you talk about this all the time. The plan that tries to walk through a regulatory audit by themselves inevitably is just making their lives that much harder, because they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the lexicon, they don't sort of speak that language to navigate through an encounter with a government regulator. So it's tough. It's an important benefit, and we want all smaller plans to be able to provide it. But there are certain perils that they should consider and find potential safeguards for it. Not just for themselves, but for their participants as well.
Sure, absolutely. And I would assume as a 316 administrator, you tend to handle smaller and medium-sized businesses rather than larger companies, because that's where they need the help.
Yeah, I mean, we've got, again, thankfully we do have some substantially larger plans. Our capacity there is obviously 316, sort of acting as that backstop on regulatory issues, but we also serve as sort of a plan administrator to alleviate the not just the liabilities, but the cost and the manpower associated with running the plan. Right, we take that right off of the plan sponsor's shoulders, so to speak.
Yeah. And of course, smaller plans have larger administration problems. Just again, finding, on the smaller plan market, TPAs, they're not really doing a good job. TPAs on the lower plan level tend to have I've seen less of a service in some of the medium sized and larger plans. So, I just think that, on the larger plan level, you have more sophisticated TPAs. So that means, less compliance errors. And, again, the bigger threat, the bigger problem from day to day concept for the plans is dealing with, administration problems.
Look, we're in the business of preventing administrative problems. So, and you are too, right? I mean, that's a big part of what you do in your practice is keeping people out of trouble. Inevitably, plans will always find it. So, I mean, I think we'll stay employed for the foreseeable future. But going back to what we said earlier, smaller plans do have a lot more things to consider and a lot more things to worry about.
Exactly. And that, of course, also means the financial advisor. Financial advisors on the larger plan, the medium-sized and larger plan level have a greater sophistication, I find, than, on the micro plan level. Large advisory practices have minimums, so they're dealing with larger plans. They tend to be more experienced. They tend to have more knowledge. You hate to throw arrows, but, how many advisor events I'd go to, and, they just had the plate lickers show up. People who had no plans on the books, or maybe they had one plan on the books. And, when you're dealing with, as an risk attorney, when you're dealing with advisors on the lower end, it's a different experience than dealing with providers with a large book of business. I just think that the sophistication, when you have a more sophisticated advisor, they have more knowledge. They can avoid a lot of the trouble that some of the smaller advisors can't, or because they don't see. And I think that the larger advisory groups have more knowledge and understand what a TPA does, and they avoid a lot of the rookie mistakes that an advisor who's new to the game, just can't avoid.
Yeah, well, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I mean, there's, at least that I know of, there's nothing on the undergraduate level, that gets you prepared for the 401k world. You kind of land in it, you end up here from somewhere else, right? So inevitably, there's a certain price to the education on every level, but particularly for advisors. I think a lot of times advisors that are newer to the game are more focused on just volume, right? Just getting as many appointments as they can and hope one or two of them lead to a plan. Whereas those older, more mature advisors, they've got other means of procuring business, so they can focus on running a better practice, on being more educated in terms of compliance. They don't have to worry about where their next paycheck is coming from. So I think that's that's a big to do with it as well. Just the nature of it, right? I mean, this is a commission kind of world, right? So you need business if you want to succeed, if you want to stay in the business. Let's not even talk about succeeding. If you just want to keep your lights on, you need some plans. So I just think that the younger folks that aren't quite established, and younger meaning newer to the business, are more focused on the here and now, right? The reality of getting paid than they are on the intricacies of ERISA or of running a compliant program.
Exactly. So that's it pretty much for this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. And we're going to be on to next week where, I guess Dan and I will talk about our Yankee game experience, because we're going to go to a Yankee game and That should be a lot of fun at another game outing.
Another outing. I think the Padres. We want to see the Padres tomorrow. Nice day game at the home office of baseball, as they used to say. And then, right? I mean, we're just circling back. I mean, we're zeroing in on Denver, which is boggling my mind because I feel like we were in Philly yesterday. The road show. We've been to Philly, LA,
Tampa. Well, St. Pete, yeah. Chicago.
Atlanta.
Don't forget Chicago.
Kansas City.
Yeah.
And now Denver. So, you guys out there anywhere near Mile High City, come on down. I mean, all right. What's the website again that they can get information and sign up?
That412site.com.
Okay. So we hope to see you guys there, and I guess we'll be recording another podcast later in the week.
Sounds good. Take care, everybody.
Have a great afternoon, guys. Take care.